尊重的葬礼这样子，所以这些故事我们自己有说的，可是可能其他人新来到唐人街没听过，
And so a final really warm thanks to Museum of Toronto for supporting this project and also has been involved in kind of work with us and Tussle Summer since before this project and having building a lot of the relationships that we have within the community. So very happy to be back at Intersections.
特别谢谢 Intersections 和 Museum， 他们这个团组呢是他们做的活动太有趣了，和跟再可以想象这个项目我们做了2年，其实我们关系一路都有继续的，每年的 Intersections 都有做一个参与这个项目，所以这次有机会跟大家一起做今天的 report back 是特别有意义的，太谢谢您了，丁和所有 Museum 的 team members。So
in the format of the symposium, I'm hoping to keep things more as a conversation between all of us. And so instead of doing a formal presentation, we had this time at the beginning where you could kind of explore the project on your own, and you can continue to do so and learn about it more as we speak with everybody today. So I will kind of keep that short and introduce the first panel. 我们今天的活动模式呢，就是我们一路会在这个stage 上面呢，就跟大家说故事，就很简单的，那我们就会跟你们说回我们这2年做的这个栽培想象活动是怎么做的。那我们第一个 panel 呢，就是现在我们可以 introduce 嘛。 So we have 3 panels today. The first panel will be giving more of an introduction to the project as well as some context of how it emerged. The second panel will talk about how we understand the process of co-design, what does that mean in terms of agency and building community power, as well as what the role of VR played in all of that. And then the last panel will be focused around legacy planning, which will transition into some of our legacy planning gardening activities that we invite you also to join in.
我们会有3个 panel， 3个对话。那第一个呢，我们就首先跟你们介绍一下我们到底这个项目是什么东西。然后第二个对话呢，就会跟你们说一下 co-design， 就是共同设计的这些技巧，我们怎么能在社区里面大多量的这样子用，还有什么我们从这个项目做完以后的意义，你们可以带到其他的活动。then 第3个就是有关于我们以后打算怎么样。我们做完这个项目了，现在那我们现在以后未来的目的是什么 ？OK， 那我们就这样可以开始。
So I'll invite our first panelists to come up. So Reese Young, Beryl Tang, and Brian Hong.
I'm the project coordinator for this project.
这是杨小姐，她是我们项目的调理员。
My name is Brian Hong. I'm a Chinatown activator as part of the Ernst Imagination Project.
And prolific garden enthusiast now. And,
yes.
This is Brian. 他姓彭。
And my name is Beryl Sang, and I manage strategic initiatives here at Cecil Community Center.
Okay, I'm getting chirped in the audience for doing rural translations. 彭先生也是这里的义工，还有是我们项目里面的一个 activator。Beryl 呢，就是这里多年私塾中心的一个 director。director 是什么？是这里的管理员吧？你是这里的管理员。Yeah. Great. Tell us what the project was about. What did we do here?
What do we do here? What are we up to? So on paper, Planting Imagination was funded by the Government of Canada's New Frontiers Research Fund and led by Professor Zhang with co-investigators from Project Protect. It is part community initiative and part research project. In a nutshell, the project was about using collaborative virtual reality technology to support and facilitate community co-design Chinatown West community members, who are also known throughout the project as Chinatown activators, collaborated in the co-design and co-building of the rear garden space here at Cecil Community Center. And the
That's too many things to translate.
Oh, sorry. I forgot about translation completely. Oh my god, sorry.
Where did we start? Bring me back. It was
funded.
kind of a university project, but also a community project.
Yes.
那我们再可以想象这个项目其实到底是做什么呢？它纸上看来说，你可以说它是一个大学的研究项目，可它当然不只是一个研究项目，也是一个社区的项目。那所以呢，我们做了这2年，其实就是让市区唐人街的社区人员带到来思索中心，看一下我们能怎样用 VR， 就是 virtual technology， 用电脑上触控的东西，来一起共同创造、共同设计一个空间。
Cool. And yeah, the Planting Imagination Project piloted a new model for the design process, centering community control and agency.
这个项目最重要的中心点呢，就是我们要把社区人员他们做的决定作为这个项目的最重要的点，不是让设计师来决定这个设计以后要怎样。我们最中心呢，就是想要把社区人员他们做的决定当为主。
And over the course of a 10-session workshop series, Chinatown activators partook in the pre-design, design, fabrication, evaluation, programming, and legacy planning phases of the Cecil Garden.
我们做过这个项目有很多期间，我们做这2年不是2年都做同样的东西，我们是经过大概有8个不同的阶段。第一个就是大家介绍大家。Like you know， 然后我们后来是做设计的，后来我们是学这个新的技能 ，like not 技能 technology， 我忘了 technology 怎么说，科技对，然后以后我们做完了那个以后，我们也开始另外一个阶段，就是把这个电脑上做的设计做成真的东西，然后 fabrication 以后我们就真的帮他安装了在这个社区的公园里面。
And Chinatown activators used a VR system custom built by the project team to virtually imagine and collaboratively shape their own Chinatown gardens.
I'm so sorry. I'm only sighing because we're introducing a lot of new vocabulary. Yeah. Part of the Planting Imagination project was learning new vocabulary with each other to do multilingual facilitation. 最后一点呢，就是这个项目就是简单来说，我们可以怎样用一个新的方法来设计一个新的空间。这个空间当然是一个花园，可是我们这个项目做的比这一单点多很多。
This process included building and evaluating 5 collective VR garden prototypes, which were then introduced to Chinatown activators during a series of co-design sessions.
我们原来是做了5个不同的设计建议，我们只是建议一下这5个不同的设计，然后以后呢，我们就跟社区人员这60多位的社区人员呢，跟他们一起做了新的决定。
And so this project is founded on the belief that the future of design, especially the design of the city and civic spaces, must be a collective action.
这个项目想要反省的一点呢，就是一个城市里面做设计正常的模式是怎样的？为什么正常的模式就只单靠于设计人员来做大部分的决定？然后这个项目呢，就是要考虑一下我们怎样能跟一般的社区人大众来做的社区决定。
And it's founded in the belief that citizens should have agency over the design and development of their own neighborhoods.
我们觉得每个人他们尽管不是设计师，尽管他们不是城市规划师，他们也应该是有一个权利 来打断他们自己社区里面的空间。
Normative city building and planning models rely on community consultations, a tokenizing form of community participation, which unfortunately is focused on gaining community buy-in to an existing design.
我们觉得一般的设计过程呢，就只单靠一些让来考虑一下你的意见，就是有好多意见论坛呢，或是让大家作为使门，就到城市规划过程里面，就你可以反映一下你的意见，可是最后来说，做决定的人不是你。
This is instead of community control of the design and fabrication process. Since community consultations are held after the completion of critical design decisions, they don't leave room for citizen input on the design.
我们觉得一般这些设计过程太慢了。其实我们这个过程是我们自己做的，自己做，还有就是自己做这个过程，自己做决定，我们自己这个空间是我们自己控制的，所以整个关系和我们自己能做的东西很不同。
A core goal of the project was to better equip communities to steward the future of their built environments.
那希望我们这个项目呢，在西区唐人街和多伦多此外，也有以后有好大的 impact the word for impact 好大的影响。
And while this project was grounded in the Chinatown West community, we hope that the collaborative model it piloted and the lessons learned can be useful for other communities and spaces that are also hoping to create a shared future.
我们好喜欢我们这里做的这个活动呢，其他社区也能考虑一下他们能怎样用。如果尽管你不是在唐人街里面，你在另外一个 neighborhood， 那可能你可以用一下我们在可以想象这个项目里面用的那些技巧自己来用一下。
And just like to briefly touch on what it was like to work with Chinatown activators as well as community facilitators, there was a bit of a learning curve, as you can imagine, with both the delivery side as well as the Chinatown activator side in regards to technology and multilingual facilitation.
瑞现在想要跟大家反省一下，我们做活动的时候其实有什么经历？跟这么多不同的人，这么多不同的参与者，其实是什么经历呢？
And a lot of work and energy has been put into supporting one another through this. And we're excited to have found a good rhythm with the project, and we'll be producing toolkits and guides to help share the learnings that we got from this project.
我们的经历其实很好，还有我们反省了好多，所以我们希望呢，就是想要做好多在网上你们能参考的东西，就是我们用过的那些表我们用过的那些设计的那些开会的那些方式，所有我们都想要做一个guidebook，让大家都可以用。Well, I was going to offer some other questions but did you?
No, that's like completely fine.
Yeah. Thanks so much for that overview, Reese. I'm curious to go to Beryl next. So, as the main rep of Cecil Center, this stalwart of our neighborhood, our primary partner in the project, because obviously we literally needed a garden. But could you tell everyone here who is not familiar with the space a bit about the history of the space itself, the Cecil Community Center, and the importance of anti-displacement in Chinatown?
Well, I think that one of the things we need to recognize first off is that Cecil Community Center was originally built as a Congregationalist church. And it was built as such because Congregationalists, I understand within the Protestant tradition, were very much into the social gospel, which meant that they were about the living Jesus and the idea of clothing, clothing the poor, feeding individuals that didn't have food.
Direct action.
It was very, very direct.
Are you saying list? Congregation list?
Congregationalists, yes, they were very much
congregationalists. Okay, let me translate up to that point.
Okay.
我问 Beryl 呢，就是想问他，其实这个空间是有什么历史的？那其实这个 hall 呢，这所社区中心，是几百年的历史。它原来是它建来的原因是做一个教堂， 这个教堂呢，他们的那些基督徒，他们是属于某一种的基督徒，他们的信仰是一种集结行动的信仰，就是说有人有需要的东西，你就得给他们；你有其他人是比你穷，你就得给他们所需的东西。你们最好信仰神的模式就是做一个好的邻居，这样子，这样 to be a good neighbor, right? It's like a true spirit.
Ultimately, it's to be a good neighbor and to be a good spirit. Now, what happened in this community is that this community was west of what was known as the Ward, which was basically immigrant and newcomer enclave. So as the community changed, this eventually became a synagogue. And like most synagogues, at that time, they were also a place where congregants of that faith, and you can still see the original chandelier here from that time, and it's inscribed with the stars of all the stars of David, that look each way. But I think what's really important to remember is that, with the Jewish congregations that came here and used this as a synagogue, it was very much a synagogue of the people. It was one for working people, and in fact, all of Cecil Street at one point was known as the Jewish ghetto or the Jewish area before it started moving west.
所以西区唐人街其实为什么叫西区，就是我们叫做第一唐人街呢？英语他们叫 the ward，the ward 就是第一个唐人街的人位。第一个唐人街其实当然就不单是唐人，那个时候有好多犹太人，还有黑人，还有原住民，所有就是加拿大政府被压制的那些人民呢，都属于第一唐人街 the ward 的原住民。那 The Ward 他们以后就往西迁移，因为他们现在的 Ward 就要起这个市中心大楼，所以呢这个教堂呢就变成为一个犹太人的殿堂。那他们其实也有继续用这个空间作为一个很大众化的一种殿堂，不是很私人的那种殿堂。Yeah.
So anyhow, as the Jewish community moved further west into Kensington Market and then eventually north into Willowdale, the Chinese Chinatown originally was where New City Hall was. And so what happened was that Chinatown became displaced, and Chinatown again began moving west. Now, if you were in this area in the 1960s and the 1970s, most of this area was residential, or it was full of, traditional Jewish meeting houses and kosher butchers and so forth. And so as the Chinese moved west into this neighborhood and Jews moved north, this neighborhood then became kind of a melting pot for many different newcomer groups. So it was the Chinese, and then 1979 it became Vietnamese, and then the Cameroon Filipino communities moved in, and Portuguese and Italians. So this neighborhood was very multicultural. And then in the 1960s...
But I will say that just now in the previous translation, I actually just called the word First Chinatown in Chinese because I actually have never heard the word directly translated to anything else but First Chinatown in like the Chinese community. So that was kind of interesting. So I inadvertently in the Chinese translation already told like the west move of displacing First Chinatown by accident, and then I heard you say it again.
Oh no, it's okay. Displacement is very real.
I just thought it was interesting that I had to make that translation choice. 我刚才就是跟他说，我第一次翻译的时候就不介意了，就把 the word 翻译成第一的唐人街，可是他后来才说第一唐人街的迁移的这个故事。所以呢，犹太人先西移，然后犹太的 butcher shop 就是说他们卖菜的那些人啊，还有犹太人他们自己的那些 meeting house 我们以前传统多伦多唐人街的那些唐人家渔会啊，那些人，他们都现在开始就迁移了。然后后来呢，当然1979年就是有越南人，他们当然就来到多伦多。后来也有葡萄牙人意大利人，所以就变成了这里 Kensington Market Chinatown 这一区 Cecil Community Center 这一区，既然叫 Kensington Market 或是叫做唐人街，可是当然不光是唐人，是很 multicultural， 是很多元化，好多不同的文化都住在这里一样。是这样来的这个故事，Yeah。
So anyhow, this neighborhood then became known as basically the ward of Kensington Chinatown, which it still is. And as such, Cecil actually then became the home to the Chinese Golden Age Society, and also at the same time the Homophile Society. So one of the most interesting things about our history is that Chinese seniors were very active playing ping pong here at the same time that the first Pride March happened outside our doors here in the 1970s.
I wonder what that society must have had its own Chinese name that I'm now going to butcher because I'm going to make up a
It's the
translation.
Golden Age Society. They call themselves the Golden Age Society. And they were a social
Way, like, I don't know, like Gold Age Society is literally what I just said. But yeah, that's cool.
It was a Chinese
我们现在就是说，这个做完教堂、做完犹太人的那些的古殿以后呢，就变成这个今年联谊会的会堂，后来才会变成一个社区中心呀。那他们当然的第一年有 Pride 就是Pride 怎么说？彩虹的那个大节目就是同性恋的自其人的这个大活动。第一年他们做的时候呢，就在狮手街这里大游行。当天我们在这里面呢就打乒乓球这样子，所以是很多人化的。
Yeah, and basically that's sort of how Cecil came into being, was that a group of Chinese seniors decided, I think the word was there's too many Chinese here. They wanted to invite other communities in, and so they sort of said, you know, this has always been sort of like a Chinese community center, but we need other seniors. We need Italian seniors, we need Jewish seniors, we need Portuguese seniors, Latina seniors, so West Indian seniors. So this very much became, when it became Cecil Community Center, sort of now it's about 43 years ago, it was really founded with the idea that this was going to be a community center. And our mission at Cecil is to meet existing and emerging community needs. And our tagline here is something for everyone, which means that we have to be inclusive, we have to be anti-oppressive, and we have to really make room for everyone in our community. You know, whatever their lived experiences, whatever their backgrounds. And that's sort of how we came to the work of anti-displacement. If you don't want to displace people,
最后一点说这里例子的一点呢，就是说，狮手中心后来变成一个社区中心，其实它从来都是一个社区中心。特别那个今年联谊会，他们就发现他们自己的会员就只是旁人，而他们的目的呢，不是想让只是一团旁人继续用 ，Thank you for time，所以他们就开始邀请其他人，犹太人啊，巴麦这里的葡萄牙人啊，意大利人，邀请他们跟我们一起参与活动，所以这里就变成今天的 Cecil Community Center， 就是这样。对，所以我们从来Cecil Community Center 他就是这里的管理人嘛，所以他就说这里的活动呢很重要，就是想要注意现在社区现在有的需要和将来有的需要。特别重要的就是得考虑一下我们社区里面最需要的人，他们需要什么？最需要的人，他们现在在其他地方找不到什么？狮手中心能不能把大家提供一下这些活动，提供一下这些资源？所以我们一路在这里做的活动都是有考虑这些东西的。
Okay, so I think we could probably talk about anti-displacement for a very long time.
I'll give you one point before we hand it to Brent.
Okay. All I wanted to say is that this is our community, and as our community grows and as we remember our history and we move forward, we also have to remember that there are many people in our community who may be left behind. So I think that all of the lessons and everything that we've learned from here is a good way for us to keep our community and to ensure that people who are vulnerable can continue to live here, and this community center is very committed to that.
我们很希望这个活动和其他将来的活动在狮手中心也能继续。我们这里的传统就是最需要的东西，最需要所有人都能在这里找到一点什么东西。Yeah, everyone can find a little bit of something here. 希望唐人街最需要最贫穷的人，最受 委屈的人，能在我们自己的社区中心里面继续找到活动。Yeah. Thank you so much, Farrell. Hopefully we can circle back. But Brian, my question to you is, you joined the project as a Chinatown activator, like me, and are now one of the leads for the fundraising group and the arts and cultural group that came out of the project and that will exist beyond the project. I think you just led the group's first self-initiated grant application, right? That's amazing. So tell us about your experience being a participant as opposed to one of the two hosts. And has your understanding of either Chinatown, the neighborhood, or the design process in general, and civic engagement in general changed from the beginning to after?
Yeah, for sure. So Chinatown has always had a quite dear place in my heart. Growing up, I would always visit here, like with family, grandparents, and my parents would visit, going to the restaurants and grocery stores and such. And I was a student at the University of Toronto, so when I moved out, I also lived in Chinatown. So I have many fond memories here, growing up and hanging out with friends and such.
Brian 就是说我问他的问题呢，就是你对于唐人街或是设计过程，或是城市规划的过程有什么新的想法？就是参与这个活动之前和参与这个活动之后的方向。那 Brian 就开始介绍一下他自己跟这个社区的关系，就是从来都是跟家人啊、朋友每个星期都会来这里买菜啊，和他在这里参与活动啊这样子，所以这么多年从小到大都会这样子的。
Yeah, so because it's been so important to me, I've always been trying to find ways to kind of also contribute back to the community, which has been so great to me. So I remember one day I was just walking and doing my groceries, and I see on the street pole a sign for the Planting Imagination, and I was like, oh my gosh, I really want to participate in this. And I remember I was on the street, on my phone, typing in the application, oh, this is so cool.
Brian 跟我们好多人一样，都是在唐人街走路的时候，有一天就看到栽培想象的一个海报那这个海报有一个 QR code 这样子，那他就经常就把自己的手机这样子按这个 QR code， 然后立即就把那个表格填上 ，Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been so glad that I was able to take part in this program, and the whole spirit of the co-design and having and involving community members in the development of spaces that serve community members. I think that was so cool. Learning about kind of these cutting edge innovative technologies that people are using in design, such as VR, virtual reality, augmented reality, meeting with an intergenerational group of community members and having people share their stories and what Chinatown means to them, and their values of what they want to see in this shared space. That was so meaningful to me. And I got to learn about planting too, which is super cool.
以前不知道的东西到现在知道的东西，其实好多的不同VR、AR 这些不同的的不同 terminology 和他之前是不会种花的，现在就跟花园有一点的熟悉。还有呢，就是其实自己尽管从小到大都在这里会买菜这些东西，其实也不太清楚这个社区里面的故事。我们可能其他人都有这样的感受。所以后来你其实是学会了好多东西。I was just saying that it seems like a lot changed.
Yeah. And then the last quick thing I'll mention is that it's really provided an opportunity for me to kind of also use my skills to contribute back as well. So I guess my background is a researcher at the University of Toronto, and as she was mentioning, I was able to apply some of those grant writing skills to help fundraise for different activities that are going on in the garden as well. So that was really, I was glad to be able to contribute in that way as well.
Brian 参与我们这个活动之前，他现在还是一个大学的资源，所以他是对于填表格和申请一些资金的东西有经验，所以 参与这个栽培想象的项目，就更能让 Brian 想象到他自己有什么角色，他自己的 experience 经历可以怎样用于社区活动里面。Yeah. How are we for time? Okay, I get one more question. Oh, that feels like a denial. I feel like the crowd probably wants you. I think it would be most interesting to the crowd for you to reflect on like what your idea of the project was going to be, like what were some of the expectations you had versus how it actually played out. But you're only going to be allowed to answer this in like one hot Twitter take.
Yes, I thought it was just going to be like a workshop series. You participate for a few weeks and a few sessions. You get to learn about tech. You got to kind of contribute to this project. But it's learning through the project about kind of like the sustainability of the project and the ongoing legacy planning and having this being more continued effort. That's the main difference for me, and I really appreciate that commitment to the longevity of the project.
我刚才问的问题就是，这个项目跟你想象中最不同的一点是什么？那 Brian 刚才说，就是他以为他参与的这个活动其实就是有10个活动，就是有10个有10次能到社区中心里面开会，开完10个会呢，那以后就说拜拜，然后就不会继续有关系。后来呢，我们大家真的有自己在社区里面的关系，还有这个项目会继续把这个花园继续 activate。Any reflections on that same question from Beryl or Reese?
From the, I guess, research project side, I've worked with Professor Zhang in the past with other research projects, but never with projects that engage so many people outside of academia. And so, again, I didn't anticipate being able to reach and also interact with and make connections with so many wonderful people and have Chinatown take up such a huge place in my heart as it does now.
Reese 觉得最不同的就是他没能想象到唐人街能在他心里面占这么大的空间。他以前是跟在学校里面有做其他的研究项目，可是没有一个项目像这个项目一样有这么多不同的人参与，这么多不同在大学以外的人参与，这是最特别的一点。
And I think the biggest piece is that through working together and developing this process and sort of mobilizing and sharing knowledge, transferring knowledge, I think what we've done is we've built a community that's even more interwoven, and we're rebuilding there's been a fraying social and cultural safety net that's been happening in Canadian society. And I think in our little way here in Kensington, Chinatown, we've actually been able to rebuild that, and specifically because it's been an intergenerational project. So, you know, because I'm on the older side of intergenerational, like I'm old, and so I think that this is just, it's really, really amazing. And I really think that it's kudos to everybody who's been engaged.
不是，我觉得他最惊讶的就是他作为我们的长辈，觉得唐人街的社区里面进来是价值观，他感觉到好像是越来越不同，而不是越来越相同这样子。所以他觉得我们经过这个活动呢，真的有新的关系。我们大家有一个更默契 ，is that a correct word? I'm looking directly at you. 更 intimate, yeah, 更 interwoven 的一个社区。Yeah, I share all of these surprises, and I think I expected there to be more conflict.
Me too.
And there was, but it wasn't the kind of conflict I expected. But I'm sure we will get to that in the other exciting panels.
So much conflict,
I
passion.
am the master of segues. OK， 我们现在就问题问完了。我自己觉得最不同的东西就是，我以为我们会有 我们这个项目里面参与者会有更不同的价值观，更不同的还有很多我们会吵架的机会。我们当然是有 tension， 可是结果我们没有大吵架这样子。So I invite all of the three of you to now take a bow, take your applause, and leave the stage. Thank you so much for your work on this project. 谢谢大家。
I have to play timekeeper, so I'm just going to introduce our second panel, which again is on co-design and our use of VR. So welcome to the stage Tyler Fox, Antushin, and Angela Wong.
OK， 我们现在做第二个讨论的主题呢，就是 VR 和 VR 怎么和共同设计过程。这是 Tyler Fox， 这是 Angela，yes Angela and Angie. Don't get it twisted, guys. You also share the same Chinese name.
So
他们中文名字两位都是安琪，that's fun for me. Okay, and my name is Chi Yi. So there's gonna be a lot of cheese on the stage. Okay, let's get it kickstarted with my first question, which is directed to myself. I think I need to do some context setting before we get into it. I very loosely worked in the community consultation sector. I was trained in urban planning, so I came into this project recruited fully as a Chinatown member, but also obviously because of this connection to the planning process. I felt very strong, I think the project team knew that I had very strong opinions about the consultation process, about how I have attended many design charrettes where it felt like the purpose of the meeting was to provide therapy to you, to change your opinion about their design project, and for you to align yourself with why the rationale for their project was so good and you should accept it. And there was just a lot more information coming at you as a participant as opposed to the other way to change and alter their actual design decisions. And that was ubiquitous. It would be Metrolink sections. It would be City Hall, open, how should we redo this thing where you pay the parking fines? Literally it could be the design of anything. So I think the contrast, you don't become aware of that until you see an alternative happen, or until you have a full visualization or an imagination of what it could be instead of that. So because I get to work in the community land trust sector now, it's so clear in contrast when we are having real meetings with the same kind of people who would go to those consultation meetings in the neighborhood, and yet they actually own the decision, they have the final say. If they don't come to a consensus, I will force them to a vote, and they're gonna have a hard conversation about what to prioritize. Those are so fascinating. And I often say to people, we should be so lucky to be in that kind of conflict, to be in that kind of tense conversation where you have to decide, well, are you going to give up 50% of the floor space to a homeless shelter, or are you going to give it to a community kitchen? What do you care about more? Say it now. And you could, have all sorts of values, but they have to decide. And sometimes the appropriate use might not be the more obvious choice versus the other choice. So that's a long ramble, but I should now translate my own ramble. That's the context for how I'm attacking this conversation, which I feel like you guys share because we all are part of this process. 我刚才就是说，我作为城市规划师和我作为这个唐人街的社区人员啊，和作为这个项目的参与者，我觉得城市规划和设计过程一般都是有一种，你来我们的设计过程，你来看一下我们做了这个设计，让我来告诉你，我做的这个设计为什么好，我就不用听你的意见，我不用听你觉得我这个设计能怎样把它改好一点，其实应不应该做这个设计，第一个问题，so 我就是 跟他们三位讨论呢，就是首先是有这一个 context， 有这个 framing。So Tyler, you were brought in to support the recruitment and the co-design process itself. And now you're doing the impact evaluations, or I should say, have finished the impact evaluations in the report. Can you tell us what was different about this project compared to what you've seen, in your practice? 我问他就是 Tyler， 你们不知道的话，他是一个facilitation 就是一个开会的专家，他不是一个开会的专家，他就是说这个共同设计过程的专家。I just called you a meeting expert because I didn't know what to say for facilitation. That's why they're laughing at me. So 我就问他，他觉得这个大家可以想象的活动有什么不同，特别的不同 ？Yeah, what's different?
Thank you so much. Yeah, so I think what you've described in terms of what normal consultation processes are like in sort of community spaces, which are usually sort of very top down from the institutions that are, controlling the space and controlling essentially the outcome. I think how we've approached this is genuinely like everything that is, what not to do is sort of how we approach that, right? So the kind of the opposite of how usual consultation processes go. So that started really with a sort of really inclusive and far-reaching recruitment process. So making sure that we had all the necessary voices and sort of all the necessary voices around the table from what is a very diverse Chinatown West community. That kind of led to having a really diverse group of Chinatown activators across age, across gender, across language. And I think something really notable is that we had the same number of kind of seniors participating as we did younger adults, which is I think a really significant achievement for such a tech-focused project.
第一个不同呢，就是我们的参与者真的很多样化，就多样，把我们说成东西这样。就是我的意思就是他有说的意思就是我们年龄很不同，长者跟少年或是成人的比例很相似，这个是跟我们recruitment 我们找人的那些模式，海报啊，网上的广告啊，WeChat 的广告啊，我们做了好多微信的推广，和人与人口头上说的那些推广做了好多活动，所以我们找到的人尽管都是唐人街的社区人员，可是他们说的语言不同，他们自己的人生经历也很不同。Yeah.
Thank you. And another sort of really important thing that kind of links to the sort of diversity of the project was making sure that we had and we made space for multilingual and multi-platform kind of co-design and co-fabrication processes, right? So that means that everyone, all these wonderful people on the team were delivering the sessions in 3 languages, and every session was designed both online and offline and delivered both online and offline to make sure that we had kind of the widest possible access for community members with both, with kind of different access to technology and different accessibility needs.
I just feel really exhausted, like thinking back, like hearing you list it all. 我们的过程不同呢，就是我们往上往下都有我们每一次开会的时候有一个网上的 option， 也有一个网上的现场的 option。还有呢，就是我们每一次都要做不同语言的翻译，就是不是每一个活动都能这样子多样不同的语言共处。And then the third point you made was that yeah， 就不光是我们开会的时候是用多于一个语言的，我们做这个样板的时候，我们自己做这个样板的时候也是用了多于一个语言来做的。Yeah, we did all that. Wow. Okay.
So I think I also want to just kind of mention that I think the other reason why this project was really different was because although it was a research project and you know kind of being delivered from like I guess sort of started as an academic project that then linked in with the community project. I think what's really amazing about it, because of the way that the team kind of delivered it and the care that was put in, but also the kind of the role it played for Chinatown activators and also I think the facilitation team during the pandemic, kind of meant that it actually doubled as a small-scale social intervention. And what I mean by that is we had in the kind of impact evaluation phase, we had a lot of Chinatown activators telling us that actually being involved in the project, especially during the last month of the pandemic, really helped them to kind of stay connected to other people in the community and also kind of prevented further social isolation during that really lonely time.
一个我们没有想象到会有这么大的影响的一个元素呢，就是做这个项目的同一个时间，就是疫情开始的那个阶段。那这段期间，我们有好多参与者，他们跟我们后来说，就是这2年我跟你们参与这个活动，其实我觉得后来呢，是我很大的原因没有在疫情中感受到很孤独的原因，所以我们自己也没想象到会有这样子的这么大的影响。当然我们有预期呢，这个项目就会有人际关系的影响，可是没有想象到这个特别的处境。Yeah.
It's good. So I think the final reason this project was really different was because although we kind of have set out to do something that's sort of really place-based and has happened in this wonderful space throughout the year, I think what we saw was that it has resulted in Chinatown activators feeling more empowered to kind of participate in civic processes beyond the bounds of this particular project. And so there's lots of examples, but one of those examples is you know, people who had come into the project and have started now, you know, doing election organizing and things like that. So I think that's a huge, both something to really celebrate, but something that also is really different. And you know, if you were running a consultation process, a traditional one, there isn't kind of space for that type of empowerment, development, growth, and agency, really.
I felt that I was on a trajectory to become less involved after going to many boring consultation meetings. 我们最后Tyler觉得最后最大不同的一个元素就是我们的参与者，我们刚才说是有66位，这有好多人，他们说他们经历了再可以想象这个项目活动以后呢，他们自己在自己的生活里面有参与其他城市规划和是政治上的活动。比如说有一个人作为例子吧，有一个人呢，他就做完了我们这个再可以想象项目，他自己没有这样，以前没有这样的打算，可是他自己就特别有去参与市政府的election 选举 Now you all know the word 选举 means election. Yeah. Those are so many things. Yeah. Thank you so much for those reflections. What's my next question that I prepared? Oh yes, it's definitely to one of the entries. So first let's go to the entry that goes by entry officially within the group. As a co-design facilitator, tell us more about how the VR technologies were used to both bring people together, obviously that was a big goal, but to build out our collective ideas and imagining. I think a lot of people have trouble imagining how we actually ran that in sessions. Could you describe that, and did anything surprise you about that? What were the challenges?
Yeah, I think for me, so I didn't have a lot of experience with VR coming into the project, so it was very interesting to see like how we designed it in the beginning. So there was a lot of work done of like measuring the space, seeing what the physical garden space looked like in the current state, and then bringing in those ideas of like what were the objects that we would bring into the space, and then building that into the game that we then had all the activators participate in to imagine what that future state would look like. So I thought that was really interesting, especially because, as mentioned, like it was kind of still mid-pandemic when we were doing the project, and so there were folks that hadn't had opportunity to be in the physical space, so it really gave them kind of a more, I suppose it sounds odd, but it's like a physical representation, even though it's a virtual representation. So I think that was really interesting to me in terms of the process of kind of how it all came together and the way that it helped people to represent that.
安琪说她自己参与这个活动之前是没有特别多的 VR 经历的，可是她就看到我们通过活动，我们用 VR 的那个模式就是很简单，做了一个游戏，把这个花园设计成一个游戏的虚拟空间。可是在这个有好多人呢，就因为疫情嘛，所以我们有好多参与者，他们自己其实是没有亲身来过西所中心。参与活动之前，可是他们一路就是在网上跟我们一起参与，所以他们用这个 VR 就是有一点是他们为 like 第一次去看这个花园，然后后来呢就在可以想象的项目人呢，他们就把很多不同的 object 是东西吧like literally 东西sorry the word for object in Chinese is like east-west, it just really means like gibberish. So we put a lot of 东西 into 那个虚拟的花园 and the objects we came up with were really fun. Could you give some examples? Because I really like some of the examples.
Yeah, I think some of the objects, obviously there were practical examples of objects, things like compost or, things like that, but then we also had some more aesthetic objects like trellises or different kinds of planters and examples of plants that we would put into the garden. So I really, one of the things I suppose I liked about the objects in particular is that in the beginning we kind of went through a brainstorming of what those objects might be, and it was really interesting when we had the sessions for the activators because people would place the objects and then they would have a rationale for why they placed it there and what they think they would do with that object and what kinds of activities would occur in the garden based on the context of the objects that they placed. So it really it was more than, I suppose in my mind, it was kind of like an interior design activity where it's just kind of like what it looks like, what the object looks like. I have no interior design experience. So to me it's about the visual, but I think the activators really brought it to kind of the reality of like what would we do with those things and why is it important to have those things and what kinds of, for example, workshops or community engagement could we do because we added a certain type of object to the space.
I'm seeing your garden bias come out. I just want to say, as someone who wasn't part of the garden subgroup, that all of the object examples you gave were garden objects. I want to also shout out the barbecue and the mahjong table and the red lanterns that had no purpose besides looking pretty. And the LED display, like basically imagine the game Sims, but make it Cecil Community Center, was what we were interacting with in a browser. 安琪就是说有好多东西呢，就在有实用的东西，比如说做花园用的那些东西我们能在这个虚拟的游戏里面把它搬来搬去，然后我们把它安装了以后，就更容易能作为一群人在网上仔细的描述，就是说如果我们把这一个花盘放在这一个位置，其实用来做什么？还有呢，就是我们如果把这个椅子搬到这一个位置 I'm saying like if you move this chair to there, like it suddenly has a whole different design implication, and that helped us have that conversation, right? So yeah, it was really very practical in that way. Thank you so much for that. I have another question. I'm curious what your experience, Angela, Anchi, that goes by Angela, was like in participating in the co-design process. How did the VR help or maybe hinder you specifically? What was challenging? What was surprising? And I'm particularly interested in moments, because I'm remembering some specifically, where you had a different idea about how to use an object or like a different need. Yeah.
I was like, why can't you hear me? So hi everyone, my name's Angela. I am the other Angie. But Angela is my English name.
You're also very welcome to provide your answers bilingually yourself. Just saying.
That's up to you, Chi.
Couldn't get away with it. Okay.
Yeah. But to answer your question, I think The game, it was probably my favorite part of the VR experience. If I can direct everyone's attention to the screen at the back, it was a lot like what the screen is displaying there. It was, like Chi said, playing Sims. So that allowed us to do a lot of fiddling around and moving things around that we didn't have to do in real life. So we don't have to lift tables and move chairs around to get a feel of the space. We could do it virtually through again. And some of my favorite moments, one moment that I have in mind, there's a dog in the game. So I remember I remember the dog. We put the dog, and we were able to change the scale, the size of the dog. So randomly, a gigantic dog, bigger than a table, would pop onto the screen. So it was a lot of fun. Yeah, it was a lot of fun to be able to play around with that.
它记忆里面就是我们有一个东西是一只狗。那这个你们后面这个游戏就是我们玩的这个游戏，那个蓄意空间。那每一个东西呢，你都能把它的大小自己按，可是我们不会看到是谁人把那个东西放到里面，所以有一个人呢，有一天就把一个很大的狗，就是比 like that just like that， 就像这样子，把它比一个戳子更大的一只狗就放到花园中间，然后我们其他人就不知道这只狗这是从哪里来的，继续。
Yeah, so that was probably my favorite memory. Just a random gigantic dog popping up, but the same potential for the other items is seeing how big of a table or how big of a planter space that we want to use. It really cut down on the physical movement that we had to do, and of course, because it was the pandemic, I think we see a lot of potential in VR and in technology, in sort of envisioning this space and also seeing our values be represented in the space through VR. And so I'll let you translate that.
But I will translate that, but also add my own spin. Well, not my own spin. I'm always adding spin when I'm doing live interpretation. There's no objective translation sources. Anyway, I think it was also important that we physically went in and moved the mouses ourselves. Like we weren't telling the planting imagination team, could you move the planter to the west side? Like Auntie Mary and Uncle Pink, like behind us, are there with us, taking turns moving every individual object, and there's like a level of agency in that experimentation that felt very important, not just convenient in the physical sense. Angela 就是说，当然这个蓄意空间最大的好处呢，就是省了我们好多时间。我们用这个蓄意的空间呢，就不用直接自己亲手用样本放在花园里面，把它搬来搬去，决定这个东西放在哪里，那个东西放在哪里。这个东西其实不适合这样子。好多东西我们更便宜、更快、更 convenient， 就是很方便，我们能做这些 experiment， 然后做每一次的版本，做了好多不同的版本，每一个人有自己的版本，然后我们做了好多不同的决定。还有呢，当然那个时候也是疫情，所以我们当然用这个蓄意的 technology， 就是更实际，因为我们好多人都只能在网上跟我们开会，是不能在现场跟我们一起做这些决定。So many very useful things about the VR itself. Okay, so back to the crowd. Not you guys, the crowd, but my crowd up here. As Tyler mentioned, the project was delivered across intergenerationally and across 3 languages. And as the design phase of the project ended, and we've been taking over the space to lead our own programming in the space, not led by the research project, you've been doing some live translation yourself as a result of, just like facilitators, or like I'm not at some of those meetings, and other people, it just depends on who shows up to each individual meeting and their own language capacity. So could you describe what that looks like for people who haven't been part of a multilingual process? And do you have any reflections on how to make that accessible for other projects who are trying to learn from ours?
I will say translation is very difficult. So she's doing a great job, especially when
You're leaving me out here to yeah.
I know. I'm gonna leave you to translate my answer too. But just saying that, essentially, the translation process is very difficult. Is one word to describe it, because it's switching from English and into another language and then switching back. So it's a very strong mental exercise. But part of the reason why, personally, why I do it is growing up. More so now, but I'm starting to feel more insecure about my Mandarin, because I feel like as I grow up and I lose those opportunities and I spend less time with my parents, I notice that my Mandarin's getting worse and worse. So and one reason why is the gardening project has been so dear to me is that I get to interact with a lot of our community elders and to find those opportunities to practice my Mandarin.
我刚才问他的问题就是，我们当然每次开会都是用多语言的模式来开会的。有人是只会说英语的，有人他们比较喜欢说广东话的，有其他人是其实广东话、普通话和英语都不说的，可是他们听得懂一点点的国语。我们这参加者有好多不同的语言经历，所以他有自己有什么意见。如果有其他想要用多语言的模式来做活动，有其他的活动项目，他们想要跟我们学习，我们有什么的经历能跟他们分享呢？那 Angela 就说，其实活动做完了以后，我们现在还继续在花园里面开的那些会呢，他对他自己的意义好大，因为他自己跟自己的中文能力的关系有高低吧，有这么多年来有不同的感受。进来的感受就是说，其实很紧张，不想要自己的中文更继续这样子退化想要继续把它保持，还有机会跟其他长辈继续说中文，其实对他自己意义也特别大。Translation approved by the person doing the speaking. Wow, big pressure.
No, you're doing great.
Continue.
The activities that we've been doing, especially now that the official research portion is done, and now it's in the hands of the community, I think it's important for us to continue providing these translation services by community members, because I think it not only strengthens relationships, but I think the heart and spirit of this project is getting at these intergenerational connections. And speaking to Beryl's presentation earlier, when we learned about our history of Chinatown, just how important these Chinatown elders are, because they are the ones that form Chinatown. They are our aunties and uncles who run the businesses that we shop at. And so to carve out space for these very important community members whose voices do not get heard all the time is incredibly important to this project, but also to everything that we do, especially if we want to continue this community work in supporting these folks who are often marginalized. I'll let you translate that.
I actually don't know what the word for marginalized is.
It's
I don't think there is one. But no. Eddie's like there is, Chi. There fully is. You just don't know it. Limitations of language. I agree, and I would add that body language has done a lot for us in a lot of our sessions. It's actually surprising how little needs to be translated in order to get a meaning across. Angela 就是反省一下，就刚才跟我反省，就是讨论，我们两个都觉得在唐人街特别要坚持着说粤语、中文，和其他你长辈说的那些语言，当然你自己要继续学，继续去保持你跟他的关系，因为如果你没能说跟有共同的语言，当然你们就没有 那种关系，那种社区的关系。还有特别重要的就是，现在在一个大部分人说英语的环境里面，谁能we're out of time，谁能参与这些设计的决定呢？当然就是不能说英语的那些人，所以也特别有这样的意义。So that concludes our reflections on the VR and the co-design process itself. Thank you all so much. 谢谢你们。
I feel like the timekeeper job is a really sad job to have because I just want these conversations to keep going. But they will sort of keep going in panel 3. So we are now at legacy planning. So we're going to talk a bit more about how this work is continuing on. So I'll welcome to the stage Victoria, Bryn, Eddie, Julie, Wuxing Shushu, and Ping Adi as well.
我们现在就开始第3个讨论，就是有关我们未来的想象。在场的是 Bryn, Eddie, and Victoria. Sorry, masses. Who else is coming?
Also, Wuxing Shushu, Ping Adi, and Julie.
Yay! Auntie Mary. Who are you?
Yes.
Thank you for joining us on stage. I will move over so you can join in the center. Oh. Everyone gets their own block. Wow. How generous use of space. You're going to have to manage the microphone over there, so you're going to have to take them that way. I'm going to officially request, with a larger group of 6, that those who are bilingual on stage should definitely do both languages. This is probably the most exciting part of the panel. 这应该是我们最有趣的讨论，就是好了，活动完了，现在我们接下来的打算是这样子。我现在访问一下你们。I'm now going to interview all of you and keep it brief to myself. I will say I am holding myself back from making very profound points about participation in VR because I don't know how to translate my own points. That's one limitation about doing multilingual. Okay, so with us on stage, Auntie Mary, Uncle and Auntie Gu, Eddie, Victoria, Bryn, and Chi. And this is the last portion of the event. Thank you all so much for joining us online and in person. We are now talking about legacy planning, so to kick us off, Victoria. As a design student and a member of the research team yourself, what was your experience with the VR co-design process? And can you share what we mean by legacy planning?
Yeah. All right. It's a long question, but I have it written down. So firstly, for legacy planning, yes, legacy planning is all about ensuring that the community that we have is equipped and supported through the design process and have the knowledge, tools, networks, and also get the agency to take over, further develop, and continue the work that we've done far into the future. And it's really amazing to work with you and everybody else in the crowd and everybody who's not here to be able to have the community be able to carry all of the things that we can and the things that they're going to plan in the future.
That's so helpful that you've written down some of your main points so that I can not do memory and also translate. Wow, that's so fun. 他刚才说的跟我们分享的就是说，我们将来未来打算未来计划的意义呢，在我们这个活动里面的意义就是说，想要我们作为社区人员，作为参与者，能以后有够的资源，支持和网络人与人之间的那种网络，和我们自己的主动性，来把这个花园作为我们自己的呀。And I think you said thank you, I think. 还有你刚才就是也多谢了所有的参与者。Yeah.
And then finally, another part of legacy planning was that the research team made sure to slowly dissolve all of their slowly dissolve the power dynamic that we have, where we're facilitating everything, and slowly the community would take over and therefore be able to have the capacity to hold their own events and take on the role that the research team basically started.
另外一个很重要一点就是，我们希望呢，通过这个过程，能让参与者他们来负责这个活动，他们来负责这个的花园，而不是做研究的项目人员来把所有的会都搞好啊，把所有以后的计划好这样子。现在是让我们来直接去计划，这样。
And then another point in terms of legacy planning is just the overall building of knowledge and capacity. So firstly, one major thing was the ability of ownership and responsibility for the space, the garden, and just overall community. So for example, I've heard participants being more willing to take on community projects if they see any issues. So rather than going to their local MP or writing to them, they would be more inclined to go to their neighbor and be like, how can we solve this together? And then also this just reflects that the responsibility has been built through this process to enable them to have the agency to be able to take on these projects.
有一个影响呢，我们特别想要的一个影响，就是通过这个活动，我们希望参与者他们不光是跟这个花园的关系有变，而是跟这个唐人街整个社区的关系有变。有变的意思就是有更大的主动性，就是以往有一个参与者他就跟我们分享了，就是说参与过栽培想象的过程以后呢，他自己发现他更愿意跟邻居们直接沟通，直接跟他们找一个方案来把东西搞好啊，把街清理好啊这样子。还有就是有关于这个空间直接的需要呢，他们就更觉得自己能直接做，而不用找其他人来做，或是投诉啊这样子。
And then the last point involves event planning and then also the facilitation within that event. So, for example, recently we held a Tongming making event, and there I was able to see that the aunties were facilitating making the Tongming, and it just was the beginning of the ownership that the community is going to take on, and I was also very happy to take part of this. And then also just like the gardening happening today, and then it just all really, I don't know, I can really see the impact of the project and people able to take on these roles, and then also just like the imagination team being to build their own language capacity. Like, and we also, I've been hearing from local people building their own language capacity, even my own, even though I'm still having like problems with broken Cantonese because they died monkeys on the street years ago kind of thing, but I can still see that effect in my life.
我们好多参与者都说，通过这个活动，我们自己的语言能力也上升了。特别是我原来的国语很差，你们每一次听到我说的国语也都有进。I'm saying that my Chinese improved session by session. They're like, yeah, sure, sure it did. Eddie 也有这样子说过，然后Victoria 她说她自己跟广东话的一个关系也是这样子的，尽管她现在在唐人街也不敢多跟人说广东话，可是通过这个项目也更有自信这样子。What was the first point you made though? Before you said the thing about the language, you said that
it was about
event planning, event planning 活动的计划有一个例子呢，就是说我们这个活动刚才做完了，这个项目我们就做了一个包汤圆的活动，而这个包汤圆的活动呢，不是我们项目计划人来搞的，而是阿姨直接搞的，所以是你们来做主动，就教我们东西，做了一个活动，所以希望也能继续有更多这些机会。Yeah. Okay, my next question goes to Bryn. Bryn, 你一开始就在社区活动，I'm just kind of flip it on you and start in Chinese and then go in English. 我就问他问题吧，我问他问题。你一开始的时候呢，就在社区活动，是你自己是身为一个协调人 ，you're a coordinator, right? In the city? Yeah. Just keep nodding at me. 就他是活动开始之前已经是在思索这个花园里面有做活动的。那我对你的好奇呢，就是你通过这个项目上面有什么经历呢？你希望看到这个花园未来的5年和10年内，有什么发展？整个团组现在进来都做什么呢？ I'm asking you, what are your hopes and dreams for the garden for the next 5 to 10 years? For context, Bryn was already involved in the garden before this whole thing, so it's kind of interesting getting the perspective of someone who kind of already had a relationship with the garden regardless of our project. Yeah, let me pass the mic to you.
I see it as, so I've been involved with the garden before all of this. Basically how I got involved was I was in a very, 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 very small apartment, and I wanted to do some planting, and I reached out to some of the folks here at Cecil to see if we could do some planting, and one of those people, Beryl, emailed me back and said, sure, would you like to start a community garden?
Bryn 跟这个花园的故事呢，就是他是怎么把这个花园开始的呢？就是原来思索中心是没有一个社区花园，就是有一个花园 ，you know， 就是给小朋友在外面玩的，可是没有一个社区花园。Bryn 呢，就是住在附近，在一个很小的 apartment 里面住，所以呢，所以他就 email， 他就发了一个电邮给 Beryl 在那边，然后就问一下，我能不能在这里开始一个自己的花园呢？他就说 OK 啊，你就开吧。And that was the origin story. I've never heard that origin story. Wow.
It's a good origin story, but a lot happened between then and now, and you've heard a lot about it from other folks, so I won't retell the whole story. But I think something that's come out of that that's really important as we look forward is what values have been identified by the community that I didn't have when I started. When I started, all I wanted to do was plant some plants and see if there was an opportunity for me to do some of that work. But what we realized through the process were identifying values of the community and actions that the community wanted to take, and putting those and prioritizing them over our individual priorities.
That's interesting to hear you say. Bryn 跟我反省讨论的东西就是，他原来开这个花园的意图很简单，就是想要种花。他种花以外，通过这一个项目的经历呢，就发现其实我们在这个空间里面能有什么其他的价值观？不光是我自己单人的价值观，我能不能跟这个社区里面分享一下考虑一下不同人其他人的价值观？能不能把那些价值观在这个花园里面变成设计的决定？
And so as we went through the process of collaborating with the community and working together as a community, certain values that we thought existed in the beginning didn't exist in the same way anymore. For instance, you might look outside and see that it's a fairly small space. It's not a really large space compared to some community garden areas in the city. And what we had originally thought was maybe transitioning to a more traditional community garden setup where everybody has their own plot and getting rid of some of the communal space and making more garden beds kind of thing. But as we went through the community work of learning together and sharing our values and ideas together, one of the main things that came out was we wanted this space to be a space of learning and a space of community and a space to get together and share ideas, share plants, share food, share everything. So the original idea of having a plotted community garden kind of disappeared, and in its place became this,
we actually took out some of the garden bed before it was a bigger garden bed. In fact, we made a smaller garden bed. We made a greenhouse because that's more of an educational space and can make the growing season last longer. So that's more conducive to education. So all these things all these conclusions we arrived at as a community were different than the things that we had originally envisioned. And that's what we want to protect going forward. That idea that we make decisions together. We don't make decisions, one or two of us who are loudest or most active or even here most of the time. We make decisions as a community, as a group, for what's best for the whole area.
As a land use professional, I cannot tell you how controversial what you have just said is in the real estate sector. As a planner, 我很感动啊 I'm just saying in Chinese that I really like this reflection. Bring 就是说这个花园他们原来想象里面就是跟其他多伦多的花园的社区花园应该的模式会一样，就是花园里面有 individual plot， 每一个人有自己的一个空间，能种自己的菜，那这就是所谓的 community garden 社区花园，有这样的意图的。可是通过这个活动呢，就跟大家商量一下，其实我们想用这一片土地来做什么，我们应该要多多关注什么呢？就发现其实这个花园不应该光是有每个人自己 individual plot 这个用途，其实我们更有兴趣的就是教育性的活动啊，跟小孩子一起做的活动，跟大家大众性做春节的时候的活动啊，吃东西的活动啊，分享的活动，就是说这一个花园其实不光是种植东西的一个空间，而是改为其实我们社区里面的人大部分人是把这个空间想象为一个活动的空间 ，you know， 所以说他第一头就改变了从这个活动过程。所以 Bryn 就是说，他觉得未来他自己最希望去保护的一个价值观呢，就是这个花园，就算它未来改变，就算它未来的目的改变、的用途改变，其实我们最应该保护的就是我们是共同做这种讨论，共同做这些决定，共同商量一下这个花园最好的用途是什么，而不是自己来决定我对这个花园有这样的想象，所以我就自己做吧。应该是要考虑到我们整个社区里面的需要。These are lovely points. Thank you so much for the reflection. I did my best to emulate the spirit of it in Mando. My next questions are for Ruxin and Ping. Can you share a bit about the groups that you are a part of, what your groups have been up to since the project ended, and also what you would like to see for the next 5 to 10 years? 我问他们的问题就是你们作为我们的长辈，你们是属于哪一个小组的？我们整个项目里面分成几个小组了，你们是属于哪一个小组？和你们想象这个花园以后，我们一个团组未来这5年到10年之间的活动会是什么呢？
我讲 Mandarin。
好啊，你开始 Mandarin。
自从我们这个唐人街这个研究型转向我们社区成员活动型以后呢，我们成立了3个小组：食品组、文艺组和种植组。
We've split into 3 subgroups. She's explaining what we've done now. We are now the arts and culture group, the food group, and the garden group.
我们参加的呢是食品组。
So she's in the food group.
参加的动机呢，不仅是民以食为天，而更重要的是，我们呢，觉得食品是一项内涵丰富、实用性广、收效快的一个永恒的课题。
The problem with translating elders who are very good at the Chinese language itself is I cannot tell you how many idioms she has just succinctly said in a few syllables that are going to take me paragraphs to emulate. So I'm not going to do that, but just know that you're missing out on poetry. We are spitting bars up here, okay?
Very longer.
No, I think you're succinct. That's what you're doing. You're being succinct. Also, this is the directional translation I prefer. No. I need to actually say what you said. So, what you're sharing with the group is that food shouldn't only just be us like stuffing our faces with delicious things. The intention of the food group is to move forward with thinking about food as a resource sharing activity, thinking about food as a very poetic entry point to community and gathering and cultural meaning and value sharing, and so much more that I'm so sorry I don't have the capability for. But back to you.
So 这个食品组的活动内容呢，它可以涵盖食品安全，食品的营养，食品的养生，而且食用这个食品的生长链，食品的厨艺，怎么做厨艺，和现在发展到食物的生产链往前推它的生长过程，以及往后推这个食品不要浪费，对吧 ？Zero waste。所以现在是我们气候变化、气候行动多伦多的一个非常大的战略任务。所以我觉得呢，我们这个食品组可以做很多的活动。
The food group has the most ambitious political platform of all of Toronto, is what I'm getting from this speech. So food is not just food. Food is obviously all of these other things. You can connect it to waste. You can now, because it's connected to a garden, connect it to its entire life cycle and do it in a very culturally specific way. The obvious thing would be to just host dumpling making workshops, but instead we could also think about nutrition workshops for the wider community, educational events related to TCM, about it being medicine, and again, so much more. That is just in the entire thematic realm of food. But basically, the idea of organizing ourselves around food is a universal connection point, if I understand your point. And the possibilities are endless in terms of what kinds of activities and events we could program, both because of the space, but also now because of the relationship we have as a group together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next one.
What is your take, Uncle? What is your take?
My name is Lu Xing. We members.
Yeah.
我们这个饮食小组在研究型项目结束以后，我们接着在1月份跟3月份这个遵循着3个宗旨，一个就是利用现在已经初步建成的这个10号中心花园这个现有的环境。第二个宗旨就是要弘扬中华的美食文化、饮食文化。第三个就是要开展这个社区的一些饮食文化活动，3个方面。
There are 3 strategic goals of the food group. One is to leverage, so from the beginning months, we're going to leverage the existing space and what's possible because of the nature of the space itself related to food programming. The second is to be very culturally specific, and in this way, Uncle Ruxing is saying specifically Chinese culture, and to offer it back as an invitation for other cultural borrowing and cultural exchange in this space. And then the third point, 你刚才说的第三个我忘了。
要呼吁社区的饮食文化生活，我们这个社区里把饮食文化生活要开展起来。
So the community invitation of we're going to end the year. So these are all 3-month segments. We're going to end the year with a big community share back of what's possible in the intersection of community and food and the garden itself.
所以我们开展了2项工作。第一项工作就是规划了这1年当中我们6次活动的内容，主要的内容就提了个题目，什么活动下面在研究。这6项活动主要的是围绕着中国的10年节日，按照中国的传统节日，比如开展第一个就是春节的元宵，第二个就是家常的饺子，第3个就是端午的粽子，第4个就是中秋的月饼 ，mooncake， 第5个方面就是各个国庆节的时候的中国国庆节的时候的各种地方特色。 这5个活动。
So there are 5 concrete activities, which you were all invited to, by the way, that are planned around specific cultural events that are already happening, and why not? So an example of this would be in September, in August, there is the Mid-Autumn Festival, so we're going to learn how to make mooncake from scratch together. And another example would be in June, there's 端午节, which is, I've never thought about what that is in English. It's where Dragon Boat Festival, yeah, in English they call it the Dragon Boat Festival. That's such a Hong Kong specific thing. Not everybody does that during 端午节, but it's when you do throw a lot of 粽子 into the river to try and stop them from eating the poet that just drowned himself. Anyway, so we're going to learn how to make 粽子in June. So there's going to be, according to each cultural festival, an invitation for folks to connect over learning how to make the specific festival's food. So come back for mooncake, come back for wrapping dumplings, come back for all those things.
OK，第2项工作就是具体的做了一次这个元宵下午茶。我们在这下午茶就是搞元宵吃，自己动手，积极行动，因为我们主业在这个，所以下面他会详细说。谢谢。
So Auntie Julie led a specific and very successful Tongyun workshop. Tongyun are the little dessert, sticky glutinous rice. Actually, they're not always dessert. Actually, the sticky rice balls that are sometimes filled and sometimes not. And we're going to let her speak more about that. I guess now. Oh, we're going to continue other points, and we're going to get to Auntie Julie later.
So, you asked me questions about the 5 to 10 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
What do you think is happening in 5 to 10 years? 将来5年到10年的展望。
I think many people say is very specific, very 具体，很具体。我这里呢，主要是从宏观的角度来展望一下我们5年到10年的变化。从宏观的角度。
Yeah, you're going to take the big picture view of what's going to happen in 5 to 10 years. Okay.
I think 华人生活在加拿大多伦多呢，已经有161年的历史了。那么唐人街呢，是我们历代华人精心打造的、承传下来的华人聚集在一起的商业街，是一个商业街，对吧？
Yeah, so Chinatown now is known as a commercial corridor, but it has existed in Chinese Canadian history for over 160 years, and it was built on the sweat and literal blood of so many people who have come before us.
而唐人街的花园呢，我是第一次听见，
以前
都是听见唐人街，没有听见唐人街花园，所以我觉得呢，唐人街花园呢，是我们唐人街的一个新的，而且是很重要的组成部分。
So I had heard of Chinatown, but I had never heard of a Chinatown garden after all of these years. And now, after going through this project, I feel extremely strongly that it should be a core, crucial ingredient to any good Chinatown, is a Chinatown garden.
那么我们的唐人街花园呢，是地处中期唐人街。 是寸土寸金的地方，对吧？空间非常有限，很小，对吧？每一寸土地都很值钱的地方，叫寸土寸金。
This Chinatown garden is on precious land. Precious because of its historical meaning, but also precious because of its expensive real estate speculative value.
所以呢，我们的建设，唐人街的建设呢，不能面面俱到，因为它小了嘛，不能面面俱到，那么就必须有特色、特殊的地方。
So therefore, of course, this garden has to be the best garden. It has to be a special garden. It has to be a unique garden to live up to its incredible preciousness. We can't waste a single inch here. We have to maximize the potential of this garden. I'm trying to relay the level of ambitiousness that you're conveying.
Sorry. 所以，这个特色是指什么呢？主要是应该能体现 中华传统文化与现代文明的交融，不光是传统的东西，也要有现代的东西。
It can't just be a traditional, oh, let's be so in love with the history garden. It should also be very modern. It should reflect the current, real, present, multicultural, everyday Chinatown.
所以展望5到10年后的唐人街花园呢，我展望呢就是4个字，要有名气，要有人气。名气就是人气就是 more people want.
She has 2 ambitions for this Chinatown garden. One is that it becomes a really famous garden, and the second is that it becomes a packed garden. So we're going to be the most lit garden in the world, is my best translation of this ambition. 不好意思，我现在要用我们剩下的时间呢，就访问一下 Eddie 和 Julie。可是我先问一下，有没有一个最后一点，就一定要跟大家分享的呢？
最后一点呢，就是怎么做到名气呢？就是我们要有个广告牌，要指引华人街的游客往我们这里来，不然我们说到这里面谁不知道，所以必须要宣传自己，让媒体也好，让人也好，就使得大家能够慕名而来吧。华人街的人呢，要家喻户晓，都知道有花园，天天可以来。那么来唐人街游览的人呢，也要跟着这个指示牌，能够找到我们的花园。那么他们就慕名而来，实至名归。OK。
莫名而来，实至名归. So famous that people will need directional signs pointing them to this garden. And in fact, one of the only things hindering us to this level of fame for the garden, once we have it all sorted the way we want, is to advertise it widely, to have big signs that invite people in, invite visitors, and to be so proud of it that we can share it also with tourists. And have people come specifically to find this garden that we have made in this beautiful collaboration with ourselves. So these are the hopes and dreams. Thank you so much for sharing them for the next trip. I'm saying last point.
人气，什么是人气？人气呢，就是要通过我们3个小组的活动，对吧？这些活动呢，逐步做到系列化。就是你不光是单个的活动，你要排一个系列，你要搞什么？要常态化、规范化，那么这样呢，才能做到常办常新。
The way to make our group sustainable and our events sustainable over time is to think about serializing them, to think about having them become reoccurring, to have them become traditions in and of themselves. So that is the ambition and the long-term view and stretch. Thank you so much. And this is clearly the leadership that we get to enjoy in our community. Yes, you can receive a copy of her entire strategic plan for our garden in your inboxes if you should so please. So my last questions go to Eddie and Julie. You both lead a programming group from the project. So Eddie, you're part of the arts and culture and the fundraising group. And Julie, you're part of the food group. Can you share a bit about how your groups formed in relation to the garden and your future plans? How would you like the audience to get involved? 我的问题呢，就是 Eddie 跟 Julie 都领到着他们自己的一个小组，一个是文艺小组，另外一个是食品组。那你们能分享一下你们的小组是如何组成的？还有呢，你们将来的计划是什么？能不能跟我们分享一下，让我们也能参与一下？ Yeah. So let's start with Eddie, because there's a paper situation.
Oh, I thought Julie obviously seemed more prepared than me. But I'm okay, I enjoy freestyle. So I got involved in the gardening program while I was still doing my MSW, that's Master for Social Work, in another community center. I thought, oh my god, this is totally for me. Because I love all the designing, all the other, groups kind of stuff. See, outside of the program, I'm working as a social worker, and a lot of values from this program align with my values and the social work values. And sometimes, I run a lot of therapy groups, And people get confused, you know, why am I spending like 2 hours of my precious time just listening to other people's bullshit? But the beauty of the group, you know, you're supporting each other by participating, right? And you see the progress by participating through the whole thing, right? That's the same thing for our program here. And a lot of times, you know, the art is a vehicle. It's the ways you do it. It doesn't depend, how do I say it? It doesn't impact how you participate in this program because it's just a vehicle. I never received any, you know, formal art training, but I just enjoy doing arts. And that's our expectation for you too. You don't require to, you know, to have any skills to join our events, and there will be a lot of, you know, opportunities for you to join through social media, and we are also helping with the direction signs and all the other paper posters. So hold tight, and there will be many events during the summer because we love the summer. Okay, I'm gonna do a little bit translation by myself because I think it's exhausting for Qi. 那我刚刚分享呢，其实就是我在这个项目之外呢，我自己是一个社会工作者。那我们其实会进行很多的治疗小组，但很多时候有很多人，他们更偏向于就是1对1的心理咨询，他们不明白自己为什么要参加这个小组，花2个小时非常宝贵的时间，就听别人生活有多么多么的痛苦。但是很多时候这个过程呢，就是你在加入这个过程的时候，你能感受到其他人的支持。你获得成长、获得体验，是因为你融入了这个过程。这个理念呢，其实跟我们参与这个花园的项目其实是一样的。我们在夏天的时候会进行更多文艺的活动，文艺和那个文化的活动。那其实你不需要任何的技能或者是艺术的训练来参加我们的活动，我们只是希望大家能够通过这种活动达到一种社区参与的一个程度，然后享受快乐就好了。What else?
You covered the points of our Planting Imagination project was like group therapy.
That's a major point. The other thing I want to say, what makes it possible for this program to exist and for all the legacy is, you know, I want to mention the empowering piece, because, you know, you're doing all the designing not only for people but with people, and that's a process for empowering, because everybody is an expert of their life. That's the principle in social work practice too, so I admire that. And we welcome everybody to bring their own lived experience and skills into the group and into all the events. Other thing I want to talk about is accessibility, just like we mentioned before, the multiple languages, the translation and the intergeneration, co-facilitation and co-design, all the things made it more possible for, you know, people from diverse background to join the group, to join all the events, to have the ownership and responsibility for all those events. 那我刚刚分享的其实是有2点，这2点是非常重要的，让我们这个项目能够持续进行的一个原因。第一点呢，就是我们的赋权。那通过参与这个项目呢，我们其实有很多时候就是在参与这个项目之中，我们发展了很多我们的技能，我们分享了很多我们的知识。那这个其实是一个互相学习的过程。这个过程本身就是一个非常美好的一个过程。那我们第2点，我讲到刚刚的是其实是包容性。那我们其实有很多我们刚刚讲到的，有语言的翻译，有促进不同代际之间的沟通。那其实这些种种方面，我们去做一些包容，的这种尝试，其实都是让这个项目变得更加的有包容性，能够吸引更多的人在更少困难的情况下参与到我们的活动中。That's probably everything from me. Thank you.
同一个问题，Shuli你觉得呢？
那我是最后一个发言。我说 Mandarin。
You're gonna do it in Mandarin? Okay.
我没有像他们那么高大。
把麦克风放
这么
好。
多理论的东西，我呢都是实际的东西。那我就写了一个这些个东西啊。我觉得我们有一个宗旨，就是要弘扬中华美食文化，因为我是负责的。 综合力的。然后呢，更主要的是我们要融入一个加拿大的多元生活，这是我们的这个整个一个宗旨。那么，
等一下，让我翻译一下。So she prepared a very practical manifesto of what her hopes for the food group and the garden project would go. She hopes to really be able to share everything she knows about Chinese culture and be able to share it back out to contribute to all of the other cultures that are happening, both in this neighborhood, but also Canada broadly, with the garden as the basis. So to start, let's talk about time. So the starting point is to think about Canadian festivals, Chinese festivals, other festivals, and how much time there is between each of them. And honestly, that becomes the very practical organizing basis for how much community lead-up time you really need to plan those events. Yes.
那么刚才我听了那个教授的讲话，还有咱们社区的领导的讲话，那么给我一个体会就是，当我来到加拿大第一站的时候，我就在这个 corner 里，我就在这个 Huron 和这条小街的 corner， 我就住这儿。那当时呢，我就认为这是一个 church 所以我不知道这是一个社区后来呢，刚才听了社区的领导讲了之后呢，我就知道这不是一个中国人，单单是中国人来的地方。现在有很多意大利人呐、葡萄牙人呐、各个种族的人都会到这儿。我们不是光是中国人，还有好多是多元文化，这给我一个深刻的体会。
I just learned something new just from participating in this project. Even though this literal street on the cross section of Huron, 你刚才说是 Huron 对吗？第一个。This was the first place I ever lived when I first moved to Canada. And all of these years, I was told it was Chinatown and thought it was a place that was very specific to just Chinese people. And through this project, I realized there were so many other cultures and people who came to this space before me and continue to arrive. And so hopefully that exchange continues.
对，所以说，我呢，刚才听的社区说，这个地方就是原来的一个 church。那么，我想呢，就是我们来参加这个活动，是我们来付出，是来救赎，是把我们的爱送给大家。
Oh, she also just learned from Beryl's introduction of the space earlier on the panel that this space was literally a church that did service, did their faith service in community work. And so she feels in reflection that her participation in this project was very much about giving and wants that giving to just be full of community love and to offer back, and really feels that our project has been done in this spirit and honors the history of the space.
所以说我们呢要跨越这个种族这个界限，而且呢，我们曾经有过一个2月份的时候有一个活动，那个活动呢就是和这些年轻的人在一起哈，好像我们这个跨越的太大了年龄跨越，但是呢我们在一起呢又很和谐然后我就知道我们能够融合在一起，我们是一个包容的这个一个，所以说，那么大家呢在参加这个活动的时候是平等的、包容的、多元的。
I was so surprised by how large of an age gap we were talking about when I saw the range in how young the young people were as part of this project. So I thought that there would be a lot of differences, but I felt that the group insisted on a very belonging, very inclusive, deeply accessible communal space. And I'm going to add on top of Auntie Julie's answer, I'm going to say that that was made possible because our meetings， 我们开会的时候呢，不光是你说的那一点，我刚才加的那一点，就是我们为什么能这么有包容性呢？为什么我们的价值观这样有相同之处？就是因为我们每一次开活动的时候呢，都说好了我们其实是有什么价值观，我们有表明的这样子一起分享，所以这一点是很重要的，我们有这样做的。
后来我收到一个 email， 是教授发给我的 email。说我被选成了food group leader，这一下对我来说是一个很大的挑战。我哪会做饭呢？做food，这简直是我的一个新课题。
I felt a lot of surprise and a lot of pressure when I got an email from Professor over there telling me that I had been voluntold/nominated by the rest of the group as the lead of the food group. I thought, how could I be the leader of a group?
My background is mechanical, construction mechanical.
I have a mechanical construction background, which I didn't know either, and I've been in a project with you for 2 years, Julie. Okay. 那我现在要问你分享最后一点呢，因为我们得把整个活动对。So, do you have a last point to wrap up our whole panel and event, Julie? 最后一点，能我们让整个活动分享。
就是说，我这我写了很多具体的东西，不像他们说那么，因为我要说的是具体的，我们要干什么？所以说呢，一个呢就是我们的时间，那么时间呢，因为这是个社区，有社区的他们的安排，所以说我们想的是我们的group要和那个社区来做决定。还有地点呢，那个地点呢，有时候你看像今天这下雨，如果我们有活动的话，就不能在花园里，那么我们可能，而且冬天的时间又很漫长，夏天又很炎热，可能我们就要在屋里，不是在离亚里。然后呢，我们的内容呢，要使得它非常的有知识性，要丰富多彩，另外呢有趣味性，才能够使我们这个呢5年和10年要持之以恒。
那我就问你说最后一句咯，那就是说这是实际性的东西。OK， 那我就翻译咯。
好吧。
那你最后一个感受就是。We need to be practical about the rest of our planning. So I can share with you that there are things that we are considering all the time, and we would invite you to join. Such as, for example, today it's raining. So what would we do in future scenarios where we planned a huge event and invited everybody to come, but then it's raining and we can't do the event in the garden? So there's lots of discussions like that, and with that, very practical planning note, which bodes well for our sustainability. I think I will end our panel. Thank you all so much for your time. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Ruchi. Thank you, Pianari. Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Bryn. And you may now. Yes. Thank you, Julie. And big round of applause. Thank you, everybody who joined us for the event. And I will now invite you all to get comfy and sit elsewhere instead of our lovely blocks.
Thank you to all of the other panelists as well. I have a slight change of plan emergency announcement. So we just received news that there is a water leak that is now bringing water into the electrical. So we are going to have to wrap up, and the city is coming to fix it. So there will sadly not be any gardening activity up next. So I invite you all to head on out. And we meet here bi-weekly as a garden group, so I invite you all back, and we will reconvene our Q&A as individual conversations, so come into the space and join us, and we are gardening every other Sunday from 2 to 4, so you can also come find us. then as well. We had planned a lovely indoor gardening activity because of the rain, but the rain's like, no, you can't even do indoor because we're gonna find you inside. So thank you all so much for joining, and thank you so much to all of the amazing panelists for the lovely conversation, and Chi for having all the languages. I forgot how to translate, sorry.
现在我们的活动就要结束了。我们原来是有意在这个讨论以后呢，就能继续在花园里面做活动。可是呢，因为现在思索中心里面有一点点的问题，就是现在冲水，现在我们水电不抠，可是水电真的开始抠了在那边。所以呢，现在我们要做一点emergency 紧急的construction 的 fixing。Anyway， 所以我们现在的活动就要在此结束。谢谢你们大家跟我们一起分享这个时间。我们每一个星期天呢都在这里3点到4点，2点到4点钟都是在这里开会、种花、讨论 etc. 做计划的。所以如果你们有兴趣跟我们继续参与我们 Planting Imagination 的 Legacy 的话，那你就每个星期天 you can find us here on Sundays。好了，谢谢大家。